June 7, 2013. For 23 years, he was a ghost in a cage, a monster whose shadow still haunted California from a cell on death row. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, was dying. For 2 decades, the survivors, the victims' families, and an entire state had waited. They waited for the final needle of justice. They waited for a sign, any sign, of regret, a flicker of humanity, perhaps a confession that could finally explain the unexplainable evil. As he lay shackled to a hospital bed, the world held its breath, listening for one last word. But the truth of his final moments would be more profoundly shocking than anyone could have ever imagined. Imagine the summer of 1985. A heat wave is blistering California, but the heat isn't what people fear. A creeping dread has fallen over the state, a terror so unique because it has no rules. It slips through your unlocked window, your open door, in the suffocating quiet of the night. It leaves behind a trail of horror that paralyzes millions. They called him the Valley Intruder, the walk-in killer, but one name was seared into history: the Night Stalker. His crimes weren't just murders. They were violations designed to shatter the one place you should feel safe, your own home. He'd use a gun, a knife, a tire iron. He attacked men, women, children, the elderly, a 6-year-old girl. The sheer randomness meant every single person was a potential target. Gun sales skyrocketed. Windows were bolted shut in 100-degree weather. And sometimes he left his signature, a pentagram scrawled on a wall or drawn on the flesh of his victims, a tribute to the evil he served. For over a year, the monster was a phantom. The attacks were so random, so widespread, that connecting the dots felt impossible. But with each crime, he grew bolder, and boldness breeds mistakes. Then, a prayer was answered. A single, perfect footprint from an obvious sneaker, found in the dirt at a crime scene. The brand was so new that only one pair in that size existed in all of Los Angeles. It was the first thread of hope in a tapestry of chaos. The final piece fell into place with a stolen car. Ramirez ditched it, but not before his finger brushed against the rearview mirror, leaving a single, pristine print. A new, experimental computer system searched its database and spat out a match. The phantom finally had a face and a name: Ricardo Richard Munoz Ramirez, a 25-year-old drifter. On August 30th, 1985, that name and a grainy, haunting mugshot were broadcast across California. The next morning, Ramirez, oblivious, strolled into a liquor store and saw his own face staring back from a newspaper rack. Panic. He ran. But there was nowhere to hide. The very people he had hunted for months were now hunting him. A crowd of ordinary citizens in East LA recognized him. They chased him, cornered him, and unleashed all their pent-up fear and rage, beating him with a steel rod. When the police finally pulled the blooded, broken man from the mob, the killer who brought a city to its knees reportedly whispered, "Thank you for saving me." The trial of Richard Ramirez wasn't about justice. It was a spectacle of pure, unadulterated evil. Instead of contrition, he radiated a terrifying glee, lapping up the attention like it was his stage. On his first day in court, he raised a hand with a pentagram drawn on its palm and snarled, "Hail, Satan," to a gallery of stunned reporters and weeping families. He taunted the loved ones of those he murdered, his lips curling into a sneer, sometimes laughing at their testimony. He was a force of chaos in the courtroom, unpredictable, unmanageable, and utterly defiant. In September 1989, the jury delivered its verdict: guilty on all 43 counts. 13 murders, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, 14 burglaries. He was sentenced to die 19 times over. Asked for a reaction, he flashed a 2-fingered devil sign and hissed one word: evil. As guards led him away, he mocked the very notion of consequence. "Big deal," he sneered at the cameras. "Death comes with the territory. See you in Disneyland." Given a chance to speak at his formal sentencing, he delivered a monologue from the depths of hell. "You don't understand me. You are not expected to. You are not capable of it," he declared, his eyes scanning the room. "I am beyond your experience. I am beyond good and evil. "I will be avenged. Lucifer dwells in us all." The judge could only state the obvious, that his deeds displayed a cruelty, callousness, and viciousness beyond any human understanding. The story of the Night Stalker is a chilling reminder of the darkness that can hide in plain sight. These cases force us to confront tough questions about human nature and the justice system. If you find these explorations into the psychology of crime compelling, think about subscribing for more stories that go to the edge of our understanding. Sentenced to die, Richard Ramirez began his new life on death row at San Quentin State Prison. One might imagine that decades of solitude, of staring at the same four walls, might force a man to confront the ghosts of his past. Not Ramirez. He remained unchanged, a monument to his own evil, as defiant and cold as the day he was sentenced. Psychological evaluations were a formality. They confirmed a soul-deep lack of remorse. As one detective said, he was simply pure evil. But his infamy didn't fade. It mutated. He became a dark icon, a magnet for morbid fascination. He received mountains of fan mail, a disturbing window into the souls of those drawn to predators. The most infamous was Doreen Lioy, a magazine editor who began writing to him in 1985. She sent him 75 letters over 11 years. In 1996, in a surreal prison visiting room ceremony, she married him. She was convinced of his innocence, claiming to see a vulnerable, boyish side to the man convicted of such monstrous acts. But even this bizarre celebrity couldn't change his reality. For 23 years, he was a symbol, a number, a caged animal waiting for a death that was always just another appeal away. In the end, the state of California never got its justice. His own body passed judgment first. In his early 50s, his health began to collapse. The diagnosis was B-cell lymphoma, a vicious blood cancer. It was a slow-motion demolition, compounded by years of chronic drug use and a hepatitis C infection that was methodically destroying his liver. In early June of 2013, he was transferred from his cell to a hospital. This was not the end anyone had envisioned. Not for the victims who had waited decades for a scheduled execution. And not for Ramirez, who had mockingly invited the world to his Disneyland death. Instead, the man who dealt in sudden, shocking violence was now the victim of a slow, clinical, and quiet decay. He spent his final days shackled to a bed, a prisoner of his own failing body. On the morning of June 7, 2013, at 53 years old, Richard Ramirez died. The official cause was complications from cancer. In the moments and days that followed, one question echoed above all others. What were his last words? In that final, fleeting window of consciousness, did he confess to more? Did he whisper an apology? Did he, at the very end, betray a single flicker of humanity? The answer was a profound, hollow, and deeply shocking nothing. There were no recorded last words. No deathbed confession. No final, desperate plea for forgiveness. The Night Stalker's final public statement was the same hate-filled venom he spewed in a courtroom 23 years earlier. The man who promised Lucifer would avenge him simply stopped breathing. Criminologists were not surprised. A psychopath remains a psychopath. But for the rest of the world, the true shock wasn't some horrifying final quote. It was the absolute, chilling emptiness of his silence. His death was met with a confusing mix of relief and bitterness. For law enforcement, a dark chapter was finally, officially, closed. But for the families of his victims, the emotions were far more complex. "It's about time," said Bill Corrins, a survivor Ramirez shot in the head. "He should have been put to death an awful long time ago." But others felt cheated. Rain Opinion, whose husband helped capture him, spoke for many. "To me, he had a better death than all those people whose lives he took. He died of a disease, not of justice, denying the state the ultimate price it had demanded." Richard Ramirez left the world exactly as he lived in it, as a void of empathy, a black hole of humanity. His legacy is not just the terror he caused, but the disturbing proof of a darkness so total that it never allowed a single ray of light, remorse, or redemption to penetrate it. The ultimate shock wasn't a word, but the haunting lack of one. It was the final, silent confirmation that he was, to his very last breath, beyond good and evil. What does justice truly look like when a killer like Richard Ramirez dies of natural causes instead of facing his sentence? Is closure ever possible for the ones left behind? It's a question with no easy answers. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to keep exploring the most compelling and complex criminal cases in history, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.